What's up, YouTube? I'm Mike, and today I'm back with another video on steroids and sexual health. I alluded to this in my previous video, saying that I had been forced by my medical condition to run a rather interesting sort of experiment with Proviron. Speaking of my medical condition, for my diehards that have been following along with how I'm doing, how my liver is progressing with the augmentin clavinate induced liver injury, unfortunately, I have bad news. I got blood work done on Friday, and I finally got the results in, and my levels are fucked. My ALT is now up to 1,381. My AST, shit. Where did I go? My AST is 977. Alkaline phosphatase is 465, and bilirubin is holding strong at 2.6. So to put that into perspective, a ALT level of 1361 is 30 times the top end of the reference range. So obviously that is more than a little bit scary to look at, but again, there's nothing I can do. It's just wait and watch and see how high it gets and hope that I don't go into fucking liver failure. So that's where I'm at health-wise. I'm eating more and more every day. I am not gaining weight. I'm down to 192 pounds. I think I saw actually 190 first thing this morning. So that's more than a little bit scary, but it is what it is, and I'm trying to stay, I'm trying just not to think about it, because again, there's nothing I can do about it. So moving on to what this video is actually covering, I have used Proviron several times, well, a couple few times in the past, primarily for the purposes of enhanced libido and sexual functioning. Proviron is a funny steroid in that it doesn't really have a whole lot of uses other than drying you out, because the second the Proviron enters skeletal muscle tissue, it is basically rendered inactive by 3-beta steroid dehydrogenase. I think that's it's 3-HSD. I think there's a deoxy in there somewhere, but so 3-HSD renders the Proviron molecule effectively useless for bodybuilding purposes. You're not going to build really any appreciable muscle at all using Proviron. But what it does do is bind to SHBG with, I think, 420%. What's the term I'm looking for? It binds at a high affinity. 420% binding affinity. So basically, not only does it gobble up all of the SHBG in your system or bind to it at a very high rate, it's purported to have the ability to kick off whatever else has been previously bound to SHBG. So if SHBG is holding on to some of your testosterone and you take Proviron, it is purported that the Proviron will kick the testosterone off of the SHBG and make it free to go about the body and do work. So it kind of has a dual purpose there. One, it's going to bind up the overwhelming majority of your SHBG, which is going to prevent it from binding to testosterone to begin with. And then whatever is currently bound when you start taking Proviron is potentially going to get kicked off the receptor and then made free to run around in your system and do work. So it basically crushes your SHBG. Now, some people, I actually was just talking to a client today, some people think that this is a bad thing. I'm not entirely certain why anyone thinks that having a crushed SHBG is a bad thing, other than that in the past, Derek, More Plates, More Dates, and Vigorous Steve have both made videos about crushing your SHBG. I don't even look at my SHBG anymore because mine's basically in the toilet year-round because I run a shitload of fucking injectables. Anytime you're using steroids, you're going to artificially lower your SHBG, and in my case, it's usually always very low, which is one of the reasons I'm kind of shocked that the Proviron does anything at all. And that brings us to the point of this video. So when I started taking Proviron at 25 milligrams a day, 25 milligrams a dose twice a day, I was already on 500 milligrams of Test E, 125 milligrams of Trenbolone E, 200 milligrams of Nandrolone Deca, and 300 milligrams of Masteron. So with that combination of hormones, I would have expected my SHBG to, at a bare minimum, be on the low end of normal, probably somewhat low. During the first 1 to maybe 4 weeks of being on the Proviron, I experienced a significant increase in my sexual desire. But what was even more exciting was that I experienced a very significant increase in sensitivity downstairs. Like I talked about this in one of my videos, that the level of enjoyment, like the sexual act, felt substantially better during the entire act and all through foreplay, to the point that I was, during foreplay, having to tell my wife, like, you got to stop touching me or there's not going to be a sexual act. And so that was phenomenal in and of itself. And then the Proviron was causing me to have very strong and unusually long orgasms when I eventually did finish. So I was falling in love with the Proviron in a major way. So I had intended on staying on it indefinitely, but admittedly, about at the 4-week mark, while the positives didn't exactly go away, they were certainly less pronounced. So what I experienced is that the orgasm quality and duration stayed the same, but a lot of the penile sensitivity started to go away. Like I was not able to maintain the intense level of sensitivity that I got during the first 3 to 4 weeks on the Proviron. So then, of course, this entire disastrous health situation occurs, and the doctors prescribe me toxic drugs, and so I panic because of the liver injury that I'm currently having to cope with, and so I started taking things out of my protocol, and one of the things that I took out first was Proviron. Because it's an oral, and despite the fact that there's no real evidence that it raises AST or ALT, obviously, when you're already dealing with fucking, liver enzymes 30 times the top end of the range, you don't want to do anything at all to add to the damage that your body is already having to cope with. So when I pulled the Proviron out, I fully expected to lose all of the effects that it was providing. And shockingly, that did not happen. What actually happened was the reverse. So as I said, when I started the Proviron, what I predict was happening is that the Proviron was steadily lowering my SHBG level. And as my SHBG level was lowering from whatever point that it was at, and again, I don't have blood work. This is purely, unfortunately, bro science. Everything that I'm presenting here is just my thoughts on what might be happening. I'm going to repeat this experiment over and over to see if to see if it is repeatable, and then maybe if I survive this liver injury, then we can do some actual blood work down the road. Because obviously I'm doing blood work constantly now, but I guess I could add an SHBG test and try and fuck with it. But nevertheless, at some point, I'll do SHBG blood work to try to track these actual numbers when I go on and off of the Proviron. What seems to be occurring, purely anecdotally, is that on the decline, as the SHBG was coming down, I was experiencing the positive effects that the Proviron was giving me, which was the increased sensitivity, the prolonged orgasms, etc. And then we got to a point where possibly SHBG was crashed into the toilet. I don't know this to be true. I'm just hypothesizing. But at some point, about 4 weeks in, the sensitivity was just no longer nearly as strong as it was on the decline, or as it was during the first 3 to 4 weeks. When I took the Proviron out, Obviously, SHBG is going to start coming back up because now there's nothing in my system with this high binding affinity. And so I expected that again, like I was saying, that I would lose all of the positive effects. Instead, what happened was the direct opposite. My libido kicked back on hard again, and the sensitivity that I was experiencing when the Proviron was building in my system came back as the Proviron was fading, or as the SHBG was fading away in my system. So for the past week and a half, I've been off, well, it's been more than a week and a half, but for the past, say, week, I've been back to the sexual state that I was on the Proviron, where I've got this intense level of sensitivity to the point that I'm having to stop my wife from touching me in any way during foreplay because I can't, it's too much. I can't control it. The massively long orgasms, the incredibly pleasurable sex have returned as the SHBG is climbing in my system. So what I'm postulating here is that there could be a cyclical way of running Proviron to maximize the positive effects. It seems that if you start Proviron and you run it where it's crashing your SHBG and you're getting all of the positive effects of the lowering SHBG to the point where you bottom out and you're no longer experiencing the extreme sensitivity, then you stop taking the Proviron, let your SHBG start climbing again, and the climbing action, for whatever unknowable reason, seemed to return the sensitivity, which I'm fully expecting will eventually over the course of the next 2 to 3 weeks top out again. If it does, and depending on where my liver enzymes are, I'm planning on starting the Proviron again to see if once we start bringing the SHBG back down, the sensitivity and all of the pros will return. If they do, then we'll have a pretty strong case that by cycling the Proviron, say 4 weeks on, 4 weeks off, we can manipulate our SHBG levels up and down. And for some, again, unknowable reason, it seems to be the fluctuation in the SHBG that is leading to the vast majority of the positive sexual side effects. The only thing that I can think of off the top of my head that would make this make any sense is just like I've said in the past about Trenbolone, that the biggest problem with Tren is cycling Tren. Because the come up is what is such a mindfuck. It doesn't matter what dose you're running. It could be 100, it could be 300, it could be 500. When the dose is climbing in your system, that's when the vast majority of the really acute psychological effects happen. And then once the dose plateaus, whether you are just used to it or whether it is in fact that the plateau curtails some of the psychological effects, A or B, whichever it is, when the dose plateaus in serum concentration is when you seem to hit your stride and no longer be so negatively affected by the mental sides. So I made an entire video saying that basically I never wanted to cycle again, that it's the ups and downs that seem to cause the most acute negative effects to your psychology. So it stands to possibly reason that if it's the fluctuations, if it's the up and down of serum concentrations of certain things in the body that cause the most acute effects, it could potentially logically follow that it's the rising and falling of the SHBG level that leads to the positive sexual side effects that you get from Proviron. So some people believe in staying on like a dose. I think Dr. Testosterone just takes Proviron at 25 milligrams a day indefinitely. I think you could certainly do that and get the vast majority of the effects. But of course, the whole reason for this channel is that I want to tinker to find how you can extract the absolute maximum for everything. And because the Proviron doesn't, it's kind of a mood boost, but I certainly wouldn't miss it. It's not like a big deal to take it out because it's not building muscle or doing anything else special. So I'm going to tinker with this over the course of the next foreseeable future. Again, the big question mark is whether or not I'll feel comfortable putting Proviron in the mix when my AST and ALT are so elevated. I'm going to do some more research before I make that final decision. But I'm curious if anybody else has some Proviron and wants to run this experiment along with me, or has some Proviron and has experienced this themselves. I know of a couple people, I won't name names, but I know of a couple people who have recently started Proviron after my latest cycle. And so if you're seeing this video and you find that you do also sort of flatline around the 4-week mark, you might try pulling the Proviron out and see if you can get the sexual side effects to come back over the course of those next few weeks. And then we'll have more data in the community to determine whether or not that this is a isolated event that's only affecting me, or if there actually is some scientific reasoning that the riding your SHBG up and down actually is the causal factor in the vast majority of the effects. So there you have it. There's not a whole lot more to say on this topic. Aside from the sexual side effects, Proviron is really great at drying you out and giving you a really gnarly fucking aesthetic. Again, it's going to make whatever hormones you are currently using that much more powerful, because of the fact that it's going to be freeing up more testosterone. It's going to free up a lot of anything that binds to SHBG is potentially going to be freed up by the addition of the Proviron. So if you've never run it, you might consider giving it a try just to see what your effects, what your particular mileage is. So, and again, please, in the comments, if anybody's had these effects, I would love to hear about it. And I would also be interested in the comments if anybody has ever experienced negative side effects from crashed SHBG. I do not believe that I ever have, but maybe I don't know. I don't know exactly even what they would be. I think I looked it up for a client earlier, and there was nothing remarkable. Let's see, low SHBG in men. If your SHBG levels are too low, it means that more of your total testosterone is likely to be available for your body to use. Oh no. Low levels of SHBG may be related to hypothyroidism or type 2 diabetes. Let's see if there's actually any negative effects. If your SHBG is low, will it cause any symptoms? In men, so everything seems to be related to not the crushed SHBG, but the fact that when your SHBG is crushed, you may have an excess of other hormones. So it says in men, excessive free testosterone can result in fluid retention, acne, increased appetite and weight gain, increased muscle mass, and mood swings. Well, obviously, if you're blasting 500 milligrams of you're already getting these when you're on cycle anyway. Too much estrogen in men can cause erectile dysfunction and larger breast tissue, which of course we're mitigating that with aromatase inhibitors or SERMs. And so there you have it. I mean, when it says if your SHBG is low, this is what it will cause. It just causes the side effects of using steroids. So I don't see anything in the medical literature specifically as to why you should be concerned about crushing your SHBG. Let's see, how will you know your SHB levels are abnormal? In men, the test could help to determine the cause of infertility, low sex drive, or ED. But again, it's saying it could help to discover the cause. So obviously, if you are not blasting steroids and you have a crashed SHBG, that's something you should definitely be concerned about. But if you are blasting steroids, then obviously you're causing your SHBG to be low. And again, in everything that I'm reading here, there's just nothing. There's nothing in the data that says crashing your SHBG is going to cause X. One of the things that I think Vigorous Steve and even More Plates, More Dates don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure they both made the claim that if you crash your SHBG, then you no longer have the transport molecule that moves the testosterone into the skeletal muscle tissue, And I think that this is a totally fallacious claim, because if it was true, then I would not be building the muscle mass that I've built over the last 4 years, because my SHBG is always in the toilet. It would seem that it would make using even remotely high amounts of steroids totally meaningless and pointless if you require SHBG in order to get your testosterone to the receptor. My understanding has always been quite the opposite, that any testosterone that is bound to the SHBG will never make it to the receptor. So I'm going to bro science, anecdotally make the claim that crashing your SHBG has no negative effects, and that it is very possible that riding it up and down could be the causal factor for why Proviron causes the rather acute positive libido and sexual enhancement effects that it does. And I would love if somebody else would help me to test this. If not, I will be happy to guinea pig it myself. And when I do, you guys will be the first to know. So as always, thank you for watching this video. We'll see you on the next one.